sugar. While extremely delicious, it's also a very dangerous substance. This is due to the fact that it's not only damaging to our body, but it's also very damaging to our teeth and actually each specific organ in and of itself. And it's also highly addictive. We have a pleasure center in our brain called the nucleus accumbens, and it's very excited by sugar in just about the same effect as drugs. In fact, one study found that Oreos activated this pleasure center nucleus accumbens even more than cocaine and morphine, which suggests that the combination of sugar and fat may be more addictive than sugar alone. And through several of these sugar addiction studies, we've really grown to acknowledge that sugar is essentially giving us a high, which means we tend to choose these foods when we're feeling at a low. Other clinical studies have shown that when cortisol, our stress hormone, was injected in women, they tended to reach for higher sugar foods afterwards. So we're really going for these sugary foods when we're stressed, when we're emotional, when we're down. There's really a big connection here with our feelings. So let's get into why these super sweet foods are so comforting and addictive and how we can avoid craving these sweets throughout the day. Sugar has become so addictive because it's been concentrated. In fact, if you look at corn, we took it, which is not very sweet at all and not addictive at all. But then we take whatever sweetness there is and we concentrate it and turn it into corn syrup. And then we concentrate and further process it into high fructose corn syrup. We do the same thing with wheat. There's only a slight sweetness to wheat, and no one would actually snack on plain wheat. It's not addictive at all. But when you concentrate it and you turn it into whole wheat, which has a slight sweetness and does break down into sugars, it becomes a little more offensive. And then when we strip it of its bran layer, like we learned in episode 1, and we really concentrate that flour into just that sugary, starchy center, it can become much more addictive and highly offensive. We also can't be fooled by claims of fat-free, because these foods typically take out the fat and subsequently add in tons and tons of sugar. And while sugar doesn't necessarily get classified as a fat on a food label, it can turn very quickly into fat once in the body. In fact, some sugars will turn even quicker into fat than fat from like an avocado will turn into fat. Thus, we need to check out the food labels. Now let's delve into the reason why sugar converts to fat. First, let's introduce insulin, the fat-creating and storing hormone. When our blood sugars go up in our body responding to something like Twizzlers, we need insulin to come and bring those sugars down. But insulin, like I said, creates and stores fat. So a high intake of sugar raises these insulin levels, and this spike causes fatty acids to be made out of fat molecules and stored as new fat droplets in the body. Also, we must check for sugar on nutrition labels, just like I said. The magic equation that people don't normally know is that 4 grams of sugar equals 1 teaspoon. And we really should be having teaspoons on our food labels and not grams, because as Americans, we typically don't measure things in grams. That's why it would be really helpful to show a ketchup label and show that every 1 tablespoon contains 1 teaspoon of sugar. And I think that would be a great way for us to start cutting down our sugar and realizing how much we're actually consuming throughout the day. To show you how sugar-packed foods can be, here are a few examples. So let's look at these Twizzler package. One of these Twizzlers contains a whole teaspoon of sugar. Just one little stick of a Twizzler contains a whole teaspoon of sugar. And like I said, every 1 tablespoon of ketchup, there's a whole 1 teaspoon of sugar in it. So we really need to be cognizant and read those labels and notice that magic number, 4 grams, 1 teaspoon of sugar. When reading labels, we also need to discover that sugar is a master disguiser and gets hidden under many fancy and sometimes complicated terms. For instance, there's honey and agave and nectar and maple syrup, and even things that sound somewhat healthy, like brown rice syrup and evaporated cane juice. Really, this all gets broken down into sugar. And some of those complicated terms I was talking about are anything that ends with ose. Fructose, glucose, maltose, sucrose, even lactose in milk is a sugar. Anything that ends with that ose is a sign that there are sugars in your food. These excess sugars cause inflammation and thus can lead to cancer, diabetes, arthritis, heart disease, so many complications in the body. So we also need to discover how this sugar can really start damaging our oral health and teeth, something we definitely heard a lot about as kids. The World Health Organization recommends we halve our intake of sugar to prevent dental caries, which are considered largely preventable, yet remain one of the most common diseases of childhood, which is 5 times more common than asthma in kids. The Journal of Dental Research study found that people who consumed less than 5% of calories from sugars had better dental health. For a 2,000 calorie diet, that would be 6 to 9 teaspoons of sugar, which is less than the amount in a can of Coke. Meaning, in one whole day, we need to be having less sugar than a can of Coke, which means that all the hidden sugars in our bread, in our ketchup, in our condiments, in our cereals, in our yogurts, and so forth, really need to be balanced to investigate what's worth all the extra sugar and what we can really start to wean down. Sugar in the form of juices and sodas are exposing our teeth to real bacterial acids. And the CDC says that 42% of children ages 2 to 11 have cavities in as young as their baby teeth. For more on living healthy, living well, be sure to subscribe to emPOWERme.tv. Follow us on Twitter and like us on Facebook.